Before we talk about exporting images out of Lightroom, it is worth saying again that the way Lightroom works means there is no pressure to do this. It's not like other software packages where once we've completed our work we have to save the changes or everything's lost. When we export a copy of the image through Lightroom, that's when all the editing will be applied and locked into the image. But don't worry though, because you still have your original that you can leave as is, or you can return it to its original raw state. However we choose to work, we do need a degree of organisation, and that will depend on whether you're an organised person or not. But remember, a little work often is generally always the best policy. I've seen people with so many versions of the same image in one folder that they then have trouble telling the difference between the small email version from the high resolution one, from the edited one, or the cropped one, because as thumbnails they look quite similar. Now once we have a few thousand images stored, we may wish we had given this section a little more thought and time. If we don't have a finished image catalogue and we allow our fully edited completed images to sit among other raw unedited photos, I would expect to have a way of identifying those images easily, and perhaps this is where we could put that 5-star rating to good use. Especially if you start making virtual copies. You will want to distinguish between those you're maybe experimenting with and those you have fully completed. For those of us who have been used to editing an image and then saving it to another folder, that way of working is hard to shake free from. For me personally, it's a comforting thing to be able to go to a folder and see 60 or 100 completed images, safe and backed up in the cloud too. But I emphasize there's no rights or wrongs here, but you do need a plan. This is something we can't make up as we go along. So what I'm going to do here with these videos is I'm going to follow my instincts, and I'm going to export my completed images in a variety of ways. Ways that I have a reason for, like export for Camera Club competitions, export for slideshows, longer term storage, posting on Flickr, etc. So at this stage it will make sense, I think, to take a little time to set up these export options as user preferred presets. There are 9 drop-down option tabs in the export module, so we don't want to have to deal with those every time we need an image to put on an email, for example. And most of those settings we can apply just once. To make these videos as realistic as possible, I've worked through 3 images from my Botanical 1 folder, and I've given them a 5-star rating. So let's go to our attribute search option, and what we're going to do here is to say search in the 2014 catalogue for any images that have 5 stars. And there's the 3 I'm referring to. So beginning with this one here, and by the way, if we were working in the develop module, let me bring that up on screen. If we're going into the develop module, if we was just completing this image, for example, we can go back to the library to export it, but we can export it with a right click. There's the option, export, and we'll see our user presets down here once we've created some. But let's go back to the library for the moment, and what we're going to do with the first of the images is to export that as a high resolution image, just as it is. So let's click to export. And from the top, let's close all these up and we'll go down these one at a time. From the top, we're going to put our images into our hard drive. So we need to find an export location. So I'm going to drop that down. Yes, I'm going to export to a specific folder. I can choose a folder later. It says useful for presets, same folder as original photo. Don't want that. I want a specific folder. So I need to choose and browse for that folder. Now if I go to my photography drive and I go to my finished images and I go to 2014, typically there will be a July folder, so July is the folder I'd like to put these in. Now what I could do is to just put them in the finished images 2014 and put the July folder in the parameters in the export module, or I can do the whole thing. Let me double click the July and select the folder. Now you can see what I mean. There's the address string. It's going to put these images in G finished images 2014 July. Now the reason I stopped and spoke about whether we choose 2014 or July is that if we're going to make a preset which is set to the month of July, in August we've got to change it. So if we then settle on 2014 and then we choose a subfolder of July, then our preset can remain for all time, and as each month passes we can just put in a new subfolder, maybe a little bit easier. So shall we do that? Let me go to choose and I'll go back to my photography, finished images 2014, and I'll select that folder as my address string. And it follows then that I need to put them into my subfolder, and the subfolder will be called July. And because we already have a July folder there, it won't create a new one. It will place these images into and with the existing July images. Do I want them to add them to this catalogue? No, I don't. So I'm going to leave that. Existing files. If I go to export a file that already exists, well, there's a lot of options here, but I think this one, which is the default, is the safest of them all. So let's tuck the export location away and we'll look at file renaming. Now we do need to give this just a little bit of thought, because if we put a custom name in here, it's got to be something that's going to be relative to any image we export using the preset we're making. So we can't sort of put something in there like botanical. If I did, it would look pretty good in the example, but what happens when I hit the preset for an image that's not a botanical shot? So what I'm going to choose here, and this again is all personal, is a custom name with the original file number, but the custom name I'm going to choose is simply finished. Because I've used this name for such a long time, that tells me that I'm dealing with high resolution original finished images. And we can see how it's going to look there. We don't have any video here, so we can just sidestep the video and move on to the file settings, because here we do need to give this some thought. The image format we save our files in, I think, is another personal choice. Some time ago I used to save TIFF files, then I moved to saving in Photoshop files, but I've actually come back to what I started with in the very early days of digital photography, JPEG. And the reason I've done that is because I now save for long-term use all of my images, my finished images, in the cloud, and using a JPEG just helps to keep the file size down. However, the JPEG here isn't destined for an email attachment where 60% may be the order of the day, or a slideshow where perhaps 80% would be okay. I'm going to be storing this for long-term use, so I'm going to stay with 100%. I still get a smaller file size, but I'm not over compressing the image. Lots of nonsense talked about saving JPEG images. I'm saving a JPEG only once at the end of the editing exercise, so there's no problem with that at all. For the colour space, I'm going to save these as sRGB. Simple reason, there's a few other options in there as you can see. Simple reason, most of my images these days are destined for slideshows or the internet or for showing digitally, so sRGB is a good choice. And of course I can have in the back of my mind, I've always got the original raw file here if for some reason and at some stage in the future I change my mind. So sRGB is also good. I don't want to limit the file size to any particular size here at all. I can't really see much use for that whatsoever in this day and age, but I'm sure there must be some. So let me close the file settings and we can look at image sizing. Well, the values I can see here are certainly not the default values, and it looks like I've been working in here in the past and Lightroom remembered what I set. All I need to do here then is to untick the box, because I don't want to put any sizes to these images at all. They're going to be the largest file size I can save, but we'll come back to this a little bit later. Output sharpening. I work with two digital cameras, both of which can record 20 megapixels, and I found over time that I very rarely sharpen images. When I do, I sharpen those I think need it. So here I wouldn't be ticking this box to sharpen anything at all. If I were to be sharpening an image, I would probably have sharpened the image in the develop module. So let's close down the output sharpening and we can open up the metadata. In the metadata, I think all of these options are purely personal. So there's not a great deal I can say. I don't feel strongly one way or another. I suppose we would always want our copyright and contact info in there, but I'm quite happy to leave all the metadata in there. I know some photographers don't like other photographers to see what settings they've used. God knows why, but that's the way the world is sometimes. Remove location info. Well, I'm sure there's going to be times when that may be a useful addition to have. And I did search the internet to try to say something intelligent about the next option, but I couldn't understand a word that was said. So I think we'll just safely move on from the metadata. And in the watermarking, I can say no change there. Let's close that down and open up post-processing. So why would we want to do something after we've just processed and exported the image? Well, it could be that although the processing of that particular image is complete, that image is going to be one of a number used in a layout that we need another piece of software for. So we can decide where it's opened. And there's quite a few options in here, but the one relevant to me would probably be open in Photoshop, and it will do that automatically once it's exported to my hard drive. But just for now, I don't need anything there, so we're done. Now before we hit the export and take that blue flower out, what we want to do is to make a user preset. Now I've already got the user presets selected. You can see the arrow pointing down, so I'm going to add one. For me, the words finished images is enough to tell me they're going to be my high resolution examples, because I'll use different names for others. Let's just take a look at the folder options here, user presets or a new folder. So it looks like we could create a folder and maybe put a group of presets within it. But I'm not sure I'm going to use so many presets that I can't just leave it sitting there with easy access. So all I'm going to do is click Create, and there you can see the preset that we've made. If we didn't want to export that image right at this moment, it's quite safe for me to close down my export module. We can export an image from the develop module. We can also export an image even as a thumbnail like this, either one thumbnail or a number of them. So let me select all three of these because they are going to be required as completed images. If I right click and go down to export, there I can go directly to my finished images. But on this occasion, I'll select all three and go to my export button. I can see my finished images preset is already highlighted, so all I need to do here is to click export. Nothing appears to be happening, but if you look up at the top left of the screen, you can see a little message that says export 3 files, and there may be a little bit of a delay while this starts, because remember what Lightroom is doing at the moment is applying all of those changes that we made in the develop module and then it has to save the images as JPEGs. Once it's complete, we'll go into Windows Explorer and we'll just take a look and see if they've arrived as we think they should. Now if we take a look in Windows Explorer, just to be reassured that what we think happened actually has, we need to go to our photography drive. We save these in our finished images folder and into the 2014 area, and we place them in the July folder. Now you can see that we haven't had a second July folder made, even though we've got it marked as a subfolder. It's already there, so all we've got to do is to remember to change that when we switch over to August. So I'm going to double click that, and there you can see the 3 images located in there with the correct file name. Now I guess if we're going to work with 2 catalogues, which is what I've chosen to do, from time to time I've got to add my finished images to my catalogue. Whether I do it every single time or I wait until I build up a batch, another personal choice. One thing we do need to remember to do is to click None on the search parameters, and what I'll also do then is go to File, Open Recent. There's my finished catalogue. I'll open that up. Remember, Lightroom always shuts down. So now I can add those images to my library. So I'll click to import, and we should be invited to browse for the images, and we've got the add option at the top right there, or the middle right. Let's go to our photography drive, and what we're looking for here is to export from our finished images into our catalogue. So we need to look in the same place actually, because although they're there, they're not actually in the catalogue. They're in the folder, I should say, not in the catalogue. But when we find them, look how Lightroom shows them to us. It does make it rather easy to make sure that when we want to add a few more images to our catalogue, we know exactly which ones. We don't have to worry too much about creating duplicates here. Let's take a quick look over on the right hand side. In the file handling, we don't need anything added there, and here we don't need anything added either. The keywords that we've already applied with these should come across with them. At least I assume they do, but all I'm going to do now is to import these into our catalogue, and there we can see them. Let's go to the main catalogue by highlighting the 2014, and if I make these smaller we should see them okay, but of course there are 1 or 2 others that I've done at another time. So if I went to my attributes and I said show me the 5-star images, there we can see the 3 images we've just added, should we need any reassurance. If we were going to make just one catalogue for all of our original images and our completed images, you can see how valuable maybe that 5-star option is, but it was quite useful here too.